There's a big day ahead for this last day of the G7 summit. We are following those developments out of Alberta. It is the final day to discuss energy and security and the war in Ukraine, but without U.S. President Donald Trump there. CTV's Colton Prale is joining us live from Kananaskis or Banff. I'm not sure which city you're in this morning, Colton. But there are two important meetings for Prime Minister Carney today, both with leaders who are not part of the G7 group, but were invited especially to be part of these talks.
Absolutely, there are. We're in Banff this morning, and you're right. This morning, Mr. Prime Minister is going to be meeting not only with the head of NATO, but also with Volodymyr Zelensky shortly after he arrives at around 8:45 is the arrival, 8:55 is the expected time, mountain time, I should say, for the meeting with the Ukrainian president. That'll be just before 11 o'clock Eastern time. And then later on this afternoon, crucially, after the Prime Minister gives his closing press conference for the summit, he will be meeting with Indian President or Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This is going to be a very significant face-to-face meeting and an attempt to reset relations to a certain degree between Canada and India. It was an invitation that, of course, was incredibly controversial. We've seen certainly a protest not only from Sikh communities, but from even Liberal MPs highlighting the fact that their constituents were opposed to this invitation. But it's part of the challenge that exists for Mark Carney, walking not only the tightrope of the leader of Canada, but as the president of the G7 summit. India is a country that has been consistently at G7 summits since prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, going back to about 2019 or so. They have always been in attendance at these summits. It's expected that they are going to continue to be here, given their economic standing in the world, but also given the importance that they hold to so many of the other countries who are in attendance here today. And this really is about diversifying the economy. It's about talking security, and India will have a significant role to play in those discussions, especially around energy security, especially for Canada. That's been a lot of the conversation about, can we, for example, reduce emissions by shipping Canadian natural gas to India? And so some of those conversations are going to be a little delicate. Certainly there is the controversy and the investigation still going on as to whether Indian officials were complicit in the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And so this is going to be a very delicate situation, and one where we may not hear from the Prime Minister after that tete-a-tete with Modi.
You know, you mentioned that President Zelensky is also here. He's going to be having his own talks with the Prime Minister as well as with other leaders. But with Donald Trump absent, although the discussions may be more focused, what real commitments can we expect from world leaders, even if a joint statement that won't have been signed by the U.S. president coming out of those talks? Like, what is Zelensky looking for?
That's the big question, because this was already going to be a potential situation where you could have a G6+1 type scenario, especially on Ukraine specifically. That has been less of a focus for the U.S. president in recent days. Obviously, the situation in Israel-Iran has driven a large part of the conversation right now around security, not just in the media, but certainly here at this summit as well. It was always going to be a challenge. This may provide an opportunity for more cohesive discussions, and certainly you're going to see broad support for Ukraine as a result of these discussions. It was incredibly important for Canada, Germany, the UK, France to show their support for Zelensky and for the war in Ukraine. However, to your point, without the U.S. there, it does feel a little flat. We even heard yesterday Mr. Carney, when he was first speaking to Donald Trump in their bilateral, one of the first things he highlighted was the importance of the president's presence at these summits to ensure that there was cohesion. Now, we have seen at least one statement come out from the G7. It was signed by all the leaders. It was on the war in Iran. And even then, it called for de-escalation in the Middle East generally, following the conclusion of the Iran-Israel conflict. And even that, just hours after that statement was released on Air Force One, Trump had, slightly different comments to say. He was talking to reporters and he was asked about a ceasefire, and he said he's looking for, and I quote here, an end, a real end, not a ceasefire, an end or giving up entirely. That's okay too. Going on to say he expects something much bigger than a ceasefire in the works. And so you're already seeing some discrepancies between the statement that was signed by the president and what he's saying just moments later, and it's certainly going to be harder to find any kind of cohesion. It's unlikely that the U.S. will be signing on to joint statements from this point out, although the schedule is expected to continue as expected even without the U.S. president.
Yeah, well, interesting to see what the follow-up from all of that will be. CTV's Colton Prale, thanks for your time this morning. If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.